It's my distinct pleasure to welcome Rivera Sun from Taos, New Mexico to the Peace and Social Justice Show on KZFR 90.1 FM. Welcome to the show, Rivera Sun.
Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to be here.
You know, I'm having fun. I'm actually looking. It says works at writer-novelist at www.riverasun.com and writer. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that, your novel activities, your writing activities?
Well, sure. You know, I think of myself as primarily a novelist, but in the lineage of social protest novels. So, you know, people can think of Upton Sinclair and John Steinbeck. I mean, we have some rather large giants in the field here. But social protest writers like to deal with the problems that we face in our times and writing about them and what is going on, and sometimes even, as I like to do, proposing a solution. So my novels are fictional. The one that most people know is The Dandelion Insurrection, which posits a nonviolent movement for change in a slightly fictionalized United States, just around the corner from today. And my newest novel is Billionaire Buddha, which deals with income and wealth and inequality and tells a story that's based on a true story of someone I know who was extremely wealthy and gave it all up and found out what true wealth really is.
I can't help but, you know, take a lead from that and take a look at your Facebook page, and it's Cesar Chavez Day, his birthday, and you kind of wrote one way to honor the work of the United Farm Workers is to scrutinize your plate, your table, your fridge, and your shelf. Find out where your food comes from and take injustice off the menu. Thanks. What could you say about the wonderful life of Cesar Chavez and all the labor work that he did?
Yeah, well, Cesar Chavez was born on March 31st, which is when we're doing this interview. It's also an annual day of commemorating the life and work of not just Cesar Chavez, but the United Farm Workers. They were a group that was co-founded with Dolores Huerta in 1962, I believe, and they famously went on strike over grapes with the Delano grape strike and boycott. And they used a combination of nonviolent actions, quite a number of them, in addition to the strike and the boycott, including picketing, a long march up to Sacramento, through the Central Valley. They got the longshoremen in San Francisco harbor to refuse to load the grapes onto the ships to be shipped out, leaving them to rot on the docks. Chavez even went to Europe and convinced European customers not to buy grapes. There's some really interesting twists to that whole story of just one of them being that the president at the time actually bought up the grape harvest and sent it to Vietnam to the soldiers, just sending these enormous amounts of grapes, more than they could ever possibly eat. So that was just one way of, you know, government and business working like a well-oiled machine to actually keep people in a state of injustice. Mm-hmm. So, which is probably one of the more populated states in the United States at this point. But the really important thing for people to know about Cesar Chavez is his deep commitment to nonviolence as a way of life and also as a way of working for change. We are so lucky because we stand on the shoulders of people like Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta and Dr. King and Gandhi and so many more, and we actually have the empirical data to know that nonviolent action is twice as successful as violence in achieving the kind of goals and aims that people are looking for all over the world, for justice, equality, respect, and dignity. That we live in a time and an era when we know how effective this stuff is. And you know, Chavez and King and Gandhi, they were the great experimenters, the ones who went on faith, that said it would be wrong of me to cause harm or injustice when I am trying to end harm and injustice. And I think one way to really honor their courage in taking that step forward on this path is to learn and study and to really know what nonviolent action is. Most times people think of it as just protest or a march or demonstration, but there are over 198 methods of nonviolent action, and they can be used in well-organized campaigns to strategically achieve the goals that people are looking for.
Well, so this is a great segue in a way, because you kind of told us a lot of things about Cesar Chavez, and including a lot of things that made him unique. Tell us a few things that make you unique, Rivera Sun.
Thanks. Well, a couple of funny things. I have red hair and a twin sister and a set of twin brothers, too, who are younger than me, and a sister in between the twins. So my mom actually had 5 kids in 3 years, which really shapes your growing up life. It makes everything very intense and very quick. I came from Maine originally. I live in Taos, New Mexico now, and I do all sorts of interesting things. My training in college was as a dancer and a theater person, and I ran a dance theater company in the Bay Area for 7 years before moving to the desert of New Mexico and starting to write novels and do more organizing and nonviolent action teaching and training.
Well, I do feel a little bit of jealousy because I was a redhead as a younger man, but it seemed to become fashionable in the last 30, 35 years because I got picked on mercilessly for having red hair, Alfred E. Newman, the whole 9 yards. So.
Well, apparently we're sort of like an endangering species right now. We're kind of like on the demise, but we have so many charms and other lovely attributes that I think the redheads will be around the planet Earth for as long as humans are, which is in question at the moment due to climate change, but most of us are actually working to ensure the continuation of the human species, redheads included.
Well, I'm glad I mentioned I was redhead as I was younger because that was the best compliment I've had all day. Shifting gears a little bit into some of the work you do and kind of since we're doing a radio pre-record and we are on radio, KZFR 90.1 FM, Chico. What's the scoop on the radio show? Love and in quotes, and Revolution Radio that you and Sherry Mitchell co-host. What's up with that? What's the scoop?
Well, Love and Revolution Radio is a show about making change, kind of significant, important, radical and deep and profound change, but not leaving your heart on the wayside as you go about doing it. You know, Emma Goldman famously said that she didn't want to be in the revolution if she couldn't dance. And I kind of feel like I don't want to be a part of a revolution doesn't have love in there. So Sherry and I get on the airwaves every week, and we're broadcasting in many radio stations around the country, and we also have a podcast that's pretty popular, number 1 on Podomatic, actually, in our category. And we tell stories of resistance and resilience, nonviolence and nonviolent action. We tell historic stories, current stories, contemporary stories, and we go into the issues pretty deep. We'll talk about real democracy versus even representational republics. We'll talk about commons-based systems. We'll talk about overhauling capitalism, socialism, communism alike. We'll talk about the need to reconnect ourselves with the interconnected web that is what it means to be human on planet Earth. You know, we cover a broad range of topics, but they all connect. And so it's a real honor and a joy to get on the airwaves with Sherry Mitchell every week and start talking about these things. We have people call us up and email us from all over the country just saying, I can't believe you're on the radio talking about this. This is incredible.
Yeah, I really like radio. I've been doing it a year tomorrow. I qualified on KZFR a year tomorrow, and I do visual journalism. But I really like about radio, Rivera, is you can really land and get some meat on a topic. You know, you don't have to worry about editing it down so much. I mean, you really can have a conversation just like we're having, and get some meaningful information out there. Versus got 2 minutes, tell us what we need to know. I mean, there's a time and place for that, but I really enjoy being on the radio. So probably a good actual shift too is you talked about this intersection. And Campaign Nonviolence is all about intersection. But on the site, it has a vision of imagine a world with dignity, justice, and peace for all. Can you expand on this for our listeners?
Sure. Well, Campaign Nonviolence is a nationwide movement to build a culture of active nonviolence and end war, poverty, racism, the climate crisis, and all forms of violence. It's a pretty audacious goal. They're a pretty audacious group. And I work on the staff for Campaign Nonviolence, so I'm a staff member, a programs coordinator, and social media coordinator. And their vision is really to confront the culture of violence, systemic violence, physical violence, structural violence, cultural violence, emotional violence, psychological violence, all the different kinds of violences, to confront them in our world and transform them to the viable and realistic alternatives that exist. Many people don't know that we don't have to be stuck in this paradigm of violence that exists in the United States, that we actually have very viable systems that people have done diligent, incredible work building out and actually implementing. For every problem that we face in the world, there is a nonviolent alternative, and it works. So, it's an audacious thing to imagine that we could change our world so completely, that we could confront this culture of violence that we're steeped in.
Yeah.
And, transform that.
Big time. I did an interview with Richard Becker, a Palestine, Middle East expert, and I kind of said, I ended it saying a quote I just made up on the fly. I mean, violence begets violence, and if we're not talking about peace, we're never going to get there. So
True. Yeah.
I'm really pleased to see all of the will and the care around that.
Well, and there's a lot of support and enthusiasm. We're kind of blown away. The staff that runs it is part of a 30-year-old nonprofit called Pace Bene, and we have groups in all 50 states and 7 countries. There were 10,000 people who participated in last year's Week of Actions that happened in September annually, and it's truly incredible. I have been deeply impressed by the yearning in people's hearts for something like this, that I would have not suspected this from my fellow countrymen and women. But people want an end to the violence that is just tearing our culture apart in so many ways. Everything from militarized violence all the way down to domestic violence, into the kind of arts and cultural entertainment. We mentioned my novels. The Dandelion Insurrection is one of the very few novels that is published that features a nonviolent resolution to the plot, this major conflict going on in society. If we look at our Hollywood films and our books that are coming out, many of them are all about violence. And, I get concerned when I see year after year books coming out about especially young women assassins. That deeply perturbs me. And I don't want to see young women growing up in our culture thinking that that's all that's out there for them to show how strong and courageous and creative they are. There's so many other ways to go about that. And as a novelist and as someone involved in transforming our culture, I keep them in mind as I go about this work.
So hopefully I get this correct. Pace e Bene. Did I get that close enough? Pace e Bene? Mm-hmm. What's the story behind that? I know 2 storytellers here, but what's the story behind that phrase? And I guess it translates to peace plus all good.
Mm-hmm. The phrase comes from St. Francis. So the organization that runs Campaign Nonviolence began with a group of Franciscans and has since expanded and now includes people of all faiths in the organization. But the idea is that it's peace and all good. And the interesting thing about it is that in many ways it's a parallel to Gandhi's word ahimsa, which meant everything that is non-harming. So it doesn't mean not harming. It means all the beautiful things in our world that do not cause harm, that support and nourish and encourage and are good and beneficial and life-affirming. And so in many ways, Pace Bene is a phrase that describes a real parallel to that.
Well, it's beautiful. For listeners just joining us, we have Rivera Sun from dialing in on the wonderful birthday for Cesar Chavez from Taos, New Mexico. And I'm pleased to say, to transition to the fact you're coming to Chico. And I'll tell a quick little story. It was a beautiful story because I was walking over with the director for the Peace and Justice Center, Rivera. We're going over to the Campaign Nonviolence lecture that Chris Nelson was given at the campus. And I literally had said I said, I felt so bad. I couldn't make, there was this wonderful lady, Rivera Sun. I didn't get to see her the last time she was in Chico. So I go to this lecture, and then I end up finding out that you're coming to Chico for this Tools for Change workshop that I've signed up for April 11th at the Chico Peace and Justice Center. What should I and other attendees expect at this workshop, Rivera?
I think you should, first of all, expect to have some fun.
Awesome.
Right? That's always a good place to start. This is a workshop that Campaign Nonviolence and the Chico Peace and Justice Center have collaborated to host, and I'm going to come and share all the tools that are in my toolbox, my favorite tools for working for change, things that actually are this part of this lineage that we spoke about earlier on in today's conversation, this lineage of nonviolence that has really developed the skill and the craft of using nonviolent action to make change. So we're going to talk about how power really works And what is the dynamic of non-cooperation? And what role does building new systems play in withdrawing our corporations from destructive old systems? We're going to talk about how we can actually use those 198 methods of nonviolent action to build cumulative campaigns that serve as stepping stones on the pathway to getting to the goal that we want our movement to succeed in. Now, that sounds pretty broad and lofty, and you may be out there listening thinking, oh, I'm not Cesar Chavez. But these are tools that every single one of us can use, no matter what role we're playing in a movement, no matter what kind of issue we're working on. These are the very tools that people have used to make change all over the world and in our local communities as well. So we're going to talk about that, and then we're also going to talk about what we can learn from the ecosystem and from ecology and from general systems theory and working for change as a whole system of change in an evolutionary approach. Because this is one of my favorite things to combine, is the idea of change as something natural and normal, something that happens all the time in our world, and has provided models and ways of approaching working for change that come right out of our very biology, our very ecology, the way that we relate with one another. So we'll be doing some work around exploring that and tapping into that potential that actually lies inside each and every single one of us.
So I'm envisioning a multimedia presentation with a lot of interactive involvement that goes about 90 minutes?
Yeah, we're going to do about a 3-hour workshop.
3 hours, okay.
Well, I only get out to Chico once a year, so you're going to get your money's worth when you come. And it is by donation. We should just say that everyone is welcome to come, whether you have resources or not, and we will take you in and celebrate you being there. So it's a 3-hour workshop. My multimedia is actually usually a board or a flip chart. I go pretty low tech, but it is very interactive, very hands-on, very engaging for whatever issues you are looking at. So if you care about climate change, this is applicable, and we'll be applying this to creating movements to address sustainability and climate change. If you care about workers' rights, and labor rights or living wages. If you are a student and you want to see more student participation in the university processes, these are tools that you can use for that. So it's very applicable, it's universal, and it's really for everyone, whether you're an old, tried and true organizer, veteran of so many movements you can't even remember them anymore, or you're just brand new hearing this interview right now saying, I don't know anything about this, but it sounds interesting.
I've been doing activism about 4 years now, and I start to get people asking me, some tips on how to do things. And there was a couple of things you mentioned. It's been a thread as we're talking about it. And Rosenberg called it all work is play, and it's really, really important when you're dealing with these really traumatic issues or issues that are really facing us, that people need to feel like they're going to have fun, or they're engaged and they're somewhat happy as they're doing this. And I've seen so many things just kind of peel apart as people feel as if, this is such a dire issue that I guess I should feel dire all the time. People can't be expected to partake in something over any period of time where they just really feel like they're being abused by the issue itself, with not the ability to have fun and some enlightenment. What would you say to that?
I got to travel up to northern Wisconsin, right on the shores of Lake Superior, this very rural region, where the citizens up there have stopped 4 or 5 major, like some of the world's largest mines being proposed from coming into their area. They're stopping a huge pig farm that wants to come into their area. They ran out a U.S. naval base from the shores of Lake Superior. They stopped a toxic waste dump. I mean, this is incredible. I don't know very many communities that have this track record in such a rural region, and this is not a liberal hotbed. This is a diverse community with a lot of perspectives. And I asked them, so how did you do all this? And they said, oh, well, we shared food, we laughed a lot, and we had fun. And I thought that was some of the best advice anyone's ever given me about how to organize. That, our hearts as human beings are so much bigger than the problems that we face. Our souls, our spirits, our capacities, our humanity is so much greater than the problems that we face, even though they seem so large. That when we tap into being real, being human, laughing together, celebrating, proposing a new vision for the world we want to see, we actually start to become unstoppable. There are dimensions to being human that no corporation can ever suppress. There are dimensions to being human that together, in collaboration and cooperation, that make us more powerful than the mightiest structures and systems that we run up against. This is something that Cesar Chavez knew, that Dr. King knew, that Gandhi knew, that everyone who practices deep nonviolence knows. And, it's such a joy for me in the world to travel all across this country and touch that part of human beings, that human heart, that capacity and potential that lies in all of us, to awaken it, to evoke it in people and communities, and then watch what they're doing. Watch what they're doing to make more justice, more equality, more peace, more respect. It's an incredible thing. It's such an honor.
What's beautiful about those activists, Rivera, on Lake Superior is, I have a quote I created for myself to keep me grounded, and I say it's not so much what you say and do, but how you feel in the moment. So if you're doing something that just is really not only good, but you feel good about it, you're coming back to the table. You want to come back and have more of that. So I really appreciate you expanding on that, which is a perfect lead into, if you could tell us in 60 seconds what change love and revolution would bring to our planet.
I think we can hardly imagine this kind of world, but it's dawning on our horizon. And as dark as the night seems right now, it makes the dawn that much brighter that's coming. People know all across this country what they want, how they want their children to live, how they want their families to live. They know they want clean water, clean land, clean air. They know they want to survive together. They know they want to see opportunities existing for our young people. They know they don't want endless, perpetual war. That peace is actually a great treasure to humanity. And I believe that we can't get to this kind of revolutionary vision from where we are today without revolutionary love. Great, profound, incredible love. And I believe that we have the capacity to awaken that in ourselves and others. And that when this kind of love force gets activated, there's literally nothing that we can't do.
Wow, that was beautiful. That was almost like you're an author. Maybe there's something that you'd want to expand upon or add that we haven't talked about.
One thing that comes to mind is that we all start these long journeys in our lives with the proverbial single step. That, I toured 30 cities last year and taught nonviolent action. But I started that journey by actually literally Googling how to bring down dictators nonviolently. I was writing the Dandelion Insurrection, and I had created a character I didn't know how to get rid of, this hidden corporate dictator. And I needed to know more, so I asked the question and took that first step. And I find this all the time in my workshops, that people are coming up, asking their questions, taking that step. It may not be their first step, it may be another step along the journey. And so I just always encourage everyone to engage in curiosity, inquiry, learning, to ask the questions, to find the answers, and to build our toolbox for being courageous change makers in a time of great change. That, many people use the warrior mentality, thinking about nonviolent activists as warriors, but I actually have as a novelist, as a writer, have a whole other set of metaphors. I see nonviolent change makers as artists, as visionaries, as singers in this human song, storytellers in the great human saga of transformation and change, that we're living in the greatest chapter of the long epic of human history, the chapter where everything might end, but we're going to see it through.
The only thing I can say for certain that's going to end is this interview, Rivera Sun. And I really had a lot of fun because I was going to plug your website, but it hit me for some reason just looking at it. You can find out more about Rivera Sun at www.riverasun. Right? That's just so beautiful. I can't wait to see and meet you and attend your workshop here on April 11th in Chico. And thanks so much for all that you do. And thank you so much for that wonderful lead-in for the birthday of Cesar Chavez. Thank you again.
You're welcome. Thank you.